Let's go ahead and take out our Bibles. And the first place that we are going to be turning in God's Word is Luke chapter 23, verse 43. Inside your service bulletins, you will find sermon notes. This is our roadmap as we walk with the Lord this morning. So just take this stroll with Jesus this Sunday morning, this fine morning. And as we take this walk with Him, we're going to stop at particular places where He wants to show us some things that we need to be seeing in our lives. And those are marked in our sermon notes as blanks. And we'll be filling those in together. But there's also space here provided for you to write down some of the things that God speaks into your heart and your life this morning. Now, the hymn we just got done singing may sound like a really strange sermon hymn. It's talking about death. It's talking about something that we would sing about at a funeral, and it would seem to be very sad, and it would seem to be something that breaks our heart. But I want to do something, and I want to challenge you to do something with me. We need to flip that script. We need to flip that script that death is the end, that death is sadness, that death is sorrow. And there are certainly components to that. And we can't deny it because this is what sin does to us. Sin ultimately results in death, our death. And that death is something that God never intended for us, but because our first parents went down that path, they brought this into the world, and that's our legacy from them. And that thing that was never meant to be is now part of our existence right now, and that is death. And it's frightening and it's scary. I'm not going to minimize the truth of that. But here's the reality, that Jesus comes into our life and into our world to say, I have conquered death. I know how to beat this thing, okay? You don't, but I do. And the first steps that I took for you is by going to the cross and laying down my life for you. I've taken away the penalty. I've taken away the thing that would keep you forever away from me and from my Father. Jesus talks about this as being the good shepherd. This is what my Father commanded me to do. This is what I came to do. I did it because I wanted to, not because Dad made me, but because we love you that much. We care about you that much. We want so much to bring this fractured world back together. And this is step one. I have to pay the price. But I'm going to show you how to beat death. And that death is not the winner. It wins a battle, but the war, it loses that war when the person who knows Jesus Christ as their Lord and their Savior grabs hold of that faith. And it does take faith, beloved, when we stare down death, especially like at a funeral. You know, I think for many of us, when we come to a funeral, we are grieving for the person that is lost and for the family. But how many times, maybe it's just me, but how many times you go to a funeral and you think, when you see that casket up there, one day, it's going to be me. And in some ways, people avoid funerals because they don't like to think about that. But beloved, it's something we do have to think about. Because by dealing with the uncomfortableness, God shows us the way through. God shows us how to beat it. God shows us that there is hope beyond this. And that's why I'm saying we need to flip that script that funerals are a bummer, that they're sad and they're downcast. And that's not what the funeral of a believer or the memorial service of a believer should be. It should be about the hope, the resurrected, hoping power that sustained that person through their life, that now steps into the glory of Jesus Christ and heaven. I think about it, it just blows my mind away. There is so much more in front of us. What we're used to is this life, and we don't have any other base of experience or anything like that. We have to only go on what God tells us, and God, I think purposely, doesn't give us the full picture of heaven, because I think He knew that if He gave that to us, we would be so obsessed about heaven that all we would do is sit around contemplating heaven, and we would be, heaven, so heavenly minded, we would be no absolutely earthly good. And God says, this is coming, but before it comes, There are things I need you to be doing. I need you to be my people. I need to be you to be my little lights of hope. I need you to be those glimmers of hope in a world that is filled with so much hopelessness and so much despair, so much confusion, living huge, enormous lives like we're doing right now. And sometimes for us as believers, it seems like this darkness is winning. It's eclipsing everything. I'm going to tell you, no, it isn't. It may seem like that, but the victory is won already in Jesus. And you, me, we are God's solution for bringing light into those dark places. God has put us in place for this very reason, for this very time. God reveals that to us in the book of Esther, where Esther is raised up to be this great queen. And you think, well, what a neat story. You know, the girl that ends up being the princess to become the queen. But God had a plan for her being that queen, and it was to save his people. In a sense, Esther is like Jesus, for she stands in the gap between her people and the king and saves her people's lives. She had a work to do, and her uncle Mordecai reminded her that, you know, who knows, Esther, but that you came into the world for just such a time as this. And that's what God is saying to you right now, too, that you came into this world. It's not who knows. God knows that you're in the world for just such a time as this. So don't run away from it. Don't capitulate it. Don't allow the darkness to have the upper hand. Don't run away from the battle, beloved, but instead engage it with the light of Christ that is in you. And when I say engage the battle, I don't mean that you go in there like you're going to war with people. I mean that you're going in there with the weapons of light, that the love of Christ will shine through you. That's how the real battles in this life are truly won. And yeah, you're going to get pushback. You're going to get people coming at you hard because Satan doesn't want that message to get out. He's feeling pretty cocky right now. You know, things seem to be kind of going his way. And this is just the perfect time that God has put you in this world, me in this world, to make that incredible difference. Each generation is called upon to do their thing in that time. We're the ones now in the game. As we talked about earlier, we have 3 dear sisters who, they've run their course. They're done. And that's great. It's wonderful. But while we're here, God has work for you to do too. And that we're still running this race. And what an honor and what a privilege it is. And today what we really want to take a look at is looking at the end of life stuff for ourselves and for others. Obviously, we're going to be thinking about those others who aren't here right now. But what those end of life things are, and not to be frightened, beloved, even though it is a scary thing. Jesus is bigger than your fear. Okay? Jesus, you can lean into him. So if your tendency is, I don't like talking about this stuff, it makes me uncomfortable. Sure it does. Makes all of us uncomfortable. It's one of the reasons why people don't buy life insurance policies, because they think if they do, they're going to drop dead. I don't know why, but I think that, we just sort of think those kinds of things. And the question is, we often say, well, if I die, beloved, right? Hello? If I die? When I die, right? When I die. But, we don't like to think in terms like that, but by avoiding it, we are also giving Satan a great position of power. And we're not seeing the huge, huge victory that is Easter. And the huge, huge victory that isn't just some historical event that happened way, way back when, but it's an absolute truth and miracle that's going to happen in your life. When you draw that last breath and Jesus is there by your side. Because you won't pass through the portals of death alone. God have mercy and pity on those people who do. Because there are plenty of people who do not know him. And that, beloved, is our job, to spare them from that moment that they have to walk through those portals alone. And you know that's the beginning of the bad stuff for them. And we don't want that for anybody. And so our role is not to hold what we have inside ourselves. I remember back in the 60s, saying, keep the faith, man. That was a blast from the past, wasn't it, guys? So you're like, whoa. Does he still have a tie-dye shirt? I won't say. But the thing is, it's not about keeping the faith. It's about letting that faith go, beloved. is you've been given a gift, the gift of faith, and you can share it with other people. And that's what we're here to do, is to continue while we're here to do this. You see, and that's our first point on the outline, this life is not all there is. This life is not all there is. And I know that you know that because we talk about that all the time. The fact that we are Christian presupposes the reality that we believe there's more to this than meets the eye. But like I said, this is the only life that we experientially know. We are living this life now in real time. And so it's hard for us to imagine something other than this. And it's hard for us to think of, well, what could that be like? And we don't exactly know. And so that creates in our lives an area where we're being challenged and we're not sure, okay, but where does that leave me? This is the only life that we know. It makes it hard to believe otherwise. It makes it hard to believe even in the promises that God himself has made to us, and that's where faith comes in. That's where faith comes in. Faith is the confidence in things hoped for. And not some blind hope, but these are the hopes that God has given us, the promises that God has given us. And God never, ever breaks his promise. God never goes back on his word. Now, you might think, well, God hasn't measured up at times in my life. He let me down. And it may be that you felt let down, but it's not true that he let you down. He's growing you to something else. And he will grow you to help to see that area where you think he let you down in was actually a real big blessing. It's a good thing it didn't turn out that way. But sometimes it takes years and years before we're able to see that. But for the mature Christ follower, as we walk with him, even if we can't see the blessings of it right now, we believe that God has our back. We believe that if it doesn't work out this way, even though I'm disappointed, that God's got this. And that he has a reason for it. And sometimes we just say, I don't even need to know the reason now. Because if my Lord doesn't want this for me, then it's probably not best for me. And I'll just keep on focusing forward. The things that we deal with at the end of life are challenging. And that's one of the reasons I think we try to push it off and we don't want to look at it. And we miss out. My reality is diminished if I don't know that there is something even better in this life as I'm going through and pushing through all the tough things, knowing that God has a bigger plan for me. But if I take that stuff offline, if I say I don't want to deal with that because it's too painful, we're really missing out on something that would help us and sustain us throughout our life repeatedly. And give us that courage and that little extra something to get us over the hump when times are tough. And Satan knows this, you see. This is why he doesn't want you to think about it, and he plays on your own natural fears. It is a fearful thing. Fear entered into the picture when our first parents brought sin into this world. So that's sort of a natural reaction now. And Satan will grab onto that, and he will use your fear, a real and natural fear, and then he'll play on it to deprive you of the blessing that God has for you because you're afraid to take that extra step, to flip the script like we're saying. And when you're able to now look at a funeral of a believer, not as a down thing, but as an awesome thing, then it changes the whole perspective because you're seeing beyond the body in the box. You're seeing beyond those last moments that the deceased had. You're seeing beyond that and knowing that they are now with the Lord. The body, yes, the body is dead, but the person that they were and are is not dead. Your loved ones are not dead, even though they're not here. Their bodies are, yes, of course. But that which was them, that essence in which God uniquely created it and blessed their lives with, that hasn't stopped. In fact, beloved, I'm going to blow your mind here, okay? But when you step through that portal, your life takes this huge next step. And everything changes. And I think from that perspective, we will look back and we'll say, oh my gosh, how I was hindered in this life. How much my own weaknesses, my own fears, my own brokenness, my own issues held me back, and now they're not there to hold me back because those things are all tied to sin, which gets its clutches into us. Quite literally, a death grip. But when we die, God pulls those fingers away, and we're free. Free to be who we were always meant to be. There's nothing like it that we can compare it to here on earth. And that's what makes it difficult. But that's what I want to encourage you with. That when your loved ones, and when it's your time, it's going to be a step up. It's going to be a beautiful moment as the Good Shepherd comes to you and says, are you ready? It's time. And you may say, is it really? Yep, it is. Let's go. And you step out of this broken life into the fullness of the life that God has in mind for you. As we get closer to those times, then we are sort of forced to think about them. Or like when we're at a funeral, we're forced to think about our own mortality. And that's not a bad thing if it gets us to be thinking about how God walks with us and works with us through that time. I think of that thief up on the cross with Jesus who begins the day by ridiculing Jesus, laughing at Jesus, mocking Jesus. But as he's watching Jesus spend his life, as he's watching how Jesus interacts with the crowds, as he's watching how Jesus interacted with him and his fellow thief, and all the people mocking him, laughing at him, abusing him, and he sees that there's something different about this guy. I've heard about this preacher before. I'm sure he's heard of Jesus of Nazareth, but now he's saying, okay, this guy talked the talk, but is he really living it out? And as he's watching how Jesus deals with his own death, he sees there's something different here. And through the power of the Holy Spirit, that man, and we say it's in the 11th hour, right? It's the very end of his life, sees Jesus for who he is. And overcome by the remorse that he feels, he calls out to Jesus and he says, forgive me and remember me when you come into your kingdom. And that's where we pick up these words from Luke 23:43. Jesus replied, I assure you today you will be with me in paradise. Jesus wasn't being figurative about today. He meant today, this very day. In a few more hours after I'm dead and they come and break your legs and you die, you will be with me in paradise. But the hard stuff's still ahead. There's still a lot of pain and a lot of hurt and a lot of suffering still ahead for you, my friend. But he's able to face it in the reality that he has been forgiven, that his God loves him, and that Jesus is his Savior. And this stuff has to end at some point. And I'll be with him in paradise. God has promised us, and that's our next point on the outline, God has promised us eternity. God created us to be eternal. He gave us a body and a spirit to go together. They were meant to be forever bodies, forever spirits. But because of what sin did to us, it broke the body and it broke the spirit. It killed it. And that's what we see is mass murder on a global scale right in the Garden of Eden. When Adam and Eve disobeyed God, they condemned all of us to this, to these broken and dying bodies, to spirits that are turned off to God, and that the only hope is that God has to step in and reignite that life. For us, and at least for me, it began in my baptism. Again, we've talked about this many times, and probably most of you were baptized as little children. Some of you weren't maybe, but most of us probably were. I don't remember my baptism. All I know is what it did to me and what it continues to do for me. Baptism is not a one-off. It's not something we just bring the baby to christen them, and you think of that word christen, right? Christening, putting Christ into their life. It's not a one-off. It's not just something that happens that one day. It is something that continues to go on and bless our life. Jesus said it's like a well of water springing up and bringing new water up into our lives as he talks to the woman at the well. This is what baptism does. It reconnects us with God. And in it, he washes us clean. And he brings that spirit to life in us that was dead. That's the first promise being given. And that we have this new spirit within us, this new life within us, even as it's encased in this broken body and the broken mind and all the challenges that we face of temptations and the struggles against our own natures and our own inclinations. But that's the first of the promises that God's given. I'm giving you new life right now, right here. And that these bodies, as we sang in the song, that we lay in the grave, that is not the end. These bodies that we lay in the grave, and this is something that distinguishes Christianity from all other religions, is it talks about a bodily resurrection. And that the body that God created in the very beginning was good, just like the Spirit was good. It's we who wrecked it. It's our first parents who wrecked it, and we continue building on their mistakes, and we wreck things. But God is the great fixer, and God fixes things. And he promises that these bodies will be resurrected to new life. We will get those forever bodies back again. Body and soul. That's what the big resurrection day is all about. That God will raise these bodies from the grave. And our spirits will come back into them. And then the really great time begins. And all of this stuff will just seem like what it is. It was a bad start. And beloved, however long we look at human history and however long that has been, is nothing in the economy of God's eternity. That this ends up being, even though it's right now, it's very intense, it's just a blip for what's yet to come. That God has greater things in store for us. We're going to take a look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3:11, because Solomon touches on this thing that God has created in each and every one of us. This thing that's planted in our hearts. There's so much more to life than what we see. When you see a beautiful sunset, aren't there times where you see this just glorious sunset, or maybe a sunrise, or just something beautiful in nature, and it almost hurts? It's so beautiful. And I can say that as a man who's comfortable in his own masculinity, even though I am wearing a robe, that there's that there's something that pierces your heart. And I think it's like almost that God is giving you a momentary glimpse of just a taste, a tiny taste of what it's going to be. And it almost breaks your heart. It's so beautiful. And you know, like a sunset, that's always kind of a good one to go with, because they don't last very long, do they? And they're always changing. Within 10 to 15 seconds, the lighting is just a little bit different than it was 10 or 15 seconds before. And God gives us these tastes of eternity. And it can come to us in a lot of different ways. Maybe it's at the birth of a child. And you look into the face of your son or daughter for the very first time, and you have that piercing moment that something wonderful has happened here. And it doesn't matter that there have been billions of other little ones that have come before. This one's special to you because God brought that little life into being through you. And it's like a little glimpse of eternity. There's more to life than what we see. And here's what Solomon says. God has made everything beautiful for its own time. That's an interesting statement when you just think about that. That God has made everything beautiful for its own time. Think of a flower. It blooms for a moment, it seems like, right? And it's beautiful for a while, but it doesn't last forever. But while it does last, it's beautiful. I think this is kind of the same concept that Solomon is putting together. That you are beautiful in the moment. Our lives are a lot longer than the life of a flower. And that there is that moment of time that we occupy where we get to show the splendor and the glory of God in our lives. And what God is capable of doing in a life surrendered to Him, a life given to Him. It is incredible. It's beautiful in its own time. And then look at what he says here. He has planted eternity in the human heart. But even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. Isn't that true? Even though God gives us glimpses of it, even though God gives us tastes of it, we still cannot comprehend the wholeness of it. And I find that encouraging, beloved, because it means that God far surpasses even my imagination. And that I can't see the end of it. Nobody can see the end of it, because the truth is there is no end to it. God is so good to us. He's planted eternity in your heart, and I think that's the thing that aches. Even in the unbeliever, the person who doesn't know Jesus, someone who doesn't come into a relationship with God, that they often feel these piercings too, but they're not exactly sure where they're coming from. They're being moved by God at work in the world, but they may not realize that it's God at work in that moment. And maybe that's where we come alongside them in one of these moments where God is touching them and they don't even recognize that that's what's happening. And maybe then we're able to share with them how God is touching them in this moment. And who knows? Who knows what God will do through that seed that you will plant in their heart that will be nurtured by the eternity that God has imprinted into every human being's heart and life. God planted eternity in our hearts so we'd resonate with it on some level. But He also speaks directly to it in His Word. He talks about, this is what I have in mind for you, that where I am, you will one day be. But until that time, continue the work. It's not done yet. What I've done at the cross is done. We're not talking about salvation, that we bring salvation to people, but we do bring to people the message of salvation. That work continues to need to be done. And God's depending on you. He's depending on me to continue that work forward, to keep pushing the ball a little further down the field in every lifetime. So as we recognize that, and as we look forward to what's yet to be, I'm hoping that to some degree I've helped now to flip the script for you, to not buy into the world's perception of what's happening at a funeral, but to see it from God's perspective. And when you see that your loved one who has been struggling maybe for the last several years or many years, I think it's harder when someone goes really quick and they're young or something. That makes it a lot more challenging, a lot more difficult. But I'm thinking now about when you see someone who has been even looking at you plaintively and saying, when is God going to take me home? I'll bet most of you have had conversations with someone you loved who said words similar to that. When is this going? Please, when will the Lord take me home? And the answer always is, it's in His good time. But while we're here, even if we don't understand it, even if we don't see it, God is doing something through us. And often it's touching the lives of other people around us that we don't even begin to perceive. But they're seeing the way we live, but they're also seeing the way we die. They see the way that we face the inevitable. And they see you facing it with hope. And with a level of peace, and even a little anxiety, like, why can't I go? You know? That's very different from people who don't have a belief in something beyond this life. They're like, why do I have to go? But the believer is saying, I'm ready to go, Lord, when you call me. You see, that can be the living witness that your loved one who maybe was in a nursing home for years and years, and you think, how could they have touched anybody's life? Oh, they did, beloved. Even if it was fellow people in the nursing home who saw the way that they met death, or the people who worked with them day in and day out and saw the way that they met death. Maybe they encourage those people who have a faith already in Jesus to be even more bold in their faith. We don't know how that all works out, but God is always working it out. But when the time is right, that's when the good stuff happens. And that leads us into our last point. Do you ever think, what will it be like? I don't mean death. I mean beyond that part. Once we have walked through that portal, okay? And Jesus promises you will not go through it alone. He promises that. Does Jesus keep his promises? Do you believe that he keeps his promises? I'm not hearing anything. Do you believe that he keeps his... Okay, I thought maybe you fell asleep a couple of minutes ago. Usually that's that's right about the time where most people start dozing off. You believe it. And God is faithful to his promises. That death is not the end. And that there's something on the other side of that. That he will be with you. I will neither forsake you nor abandon you. Jesus talks about with you, I will be with you always to the very end of the age. To the very end of your life. He will be there. He will not abandon you when you have to go through that portal. But once you do, everything's going to turn inside out. And you're going to see, oh my gosh, why did I ever dread this? What was I thinking? Oh my gosh. Just like that great hymn, that great funeral hymn, my God, how great you are. Oh my gosh, look at this place. This is incredible. Can you imagine, beloved, what that moment will be like? Now, that's not pie in the sky, guys. That's not me whistling in the dark, trying to make you feel good. I'm not here to make you feel good. I'm here to tell you the truth. And this is the truth, that God has so much better for you beyond this life. And it's already there. Jesus gives us those words, I'm going to prepare a place for you. But while he's preparing it, guess what? We got to slog it out here yet. But once we're done, Jesus says, I will take you to that room. When your room is finished, and this is one of my go-to passages in funerals, is John chapter 14. In my Father's house, there are many, many rooms. And I'm going there now to prepare a place for you. And when it's ready, beloved, when it's ready, I'm coming back for you. But it's not ready yet. But when it is, imagine what that's going to be like. Imagine heaven in all of its glory. To reconnect with people you haven't seen for years. And right now, Sadie's right on top of my mind right now, because here's a beautiful lady that lived a long, full life to 101. Everybody she grew up with was already gone. I don't think we understand the lonesomeness in an older heart that you make new friends. There's no doubt about it. She made a friend everywhere she went. You know that that's true. But there's something special about that generation you grew up in. The people that knew you and they got you because you all grew up in sort of the same experiences and stuff like that. New friends are great, but it's not exactly the same. And think of the reunion she's having right now. All her friends. Remember when? Do you remember? Oh, do you remember this? And beyond, that great, awesome moment of being in Jesus' presence and hearing those words, well done, good and faithful servant. I think probably one of the big highlights for her is Sam. And being able to be together and rehashing some old jokes, old stories, and looking at all the new stuff that's ahead. Beloved, that makes us tear, but not because we're sad, but because of the joy for it. And that's what I mean. Flip the script for those who pass through the portal of death. It's not what you think it is. It all gets better. The worst is behind them. The worst that the world could throw at them, the worst that the devil will do to us right up until the end, trying to undermine us, trying to make us frightened and fearful, all of that is done. He has no more chances at you. And now you're free to be exactly whom God created you to be. And yet there's still another promise coming our way. And that is the resurrection to new life. And then God talks about it. Think about this. The old heaven and the old earth will pass away. That's what the Bible says. And God says, look, I'm going to make everything new. We're going to do a new start. Everything, we're going to just do this all brand new, brand spanking new. And beloved, that's when it really begins. And who knows what God has in mind for us at that point? I don't. But I know that the Bible tells us no mind can conceive, no eye has seen what God has in store for us, for you, beyond that door. Jesus' friend and disciple shares from a vision that he had on the island of Patmos. This is John. He's 100 years old. Kind of a familiar age, isn't it? Probably close to 100 years old. Quarrying marble on the island of Patmos at that age. The life expectancy for a young man was about 18 months. And here this man was in exile because of his belief in Jesus. That's why he was here. He was sent there in prison. He should have been put to death, but he was such a powerful individual in the minds of a lot of people that the Roman authorities were kind of afraid to put him to death. There is stories that they tried to put him to death and he wouldn't die. Now, I don't know, it's not in the Bible, but there is tradition, and maybe God has done great and wonderful things. But whatever reason, he was there, and that's when God gives him this beautiful vision of Jesus coming to us and to tell us, and as we deal with this life, that God's got all. And I'm going to tell you, the book of Revelation, everybody wants to study it. Everybody wants to take a look at it. Oh my gosh, how's it all going to end? I can tell you how it all ends. The book of Revelation is all about that God's got this. And you know what? There's going to be some serious stuff going down. And it's not up to you to set your clock to it because you can't. And it talks in confusing imagery and stuff like that, but it's meant to show us that you don't have control of this. Here's what you do, and this is what God is doing, and that God has got this. And the ultimate end of Revelation is God wins, Satan loses. And because Jesus wins, we win. You see, it's all in front of us. John is given this incredible vision in Revelation 21, verse 1. Give you a little bit of time to get there. He's gone through all the ups and downs of human history. And Revelation is interesting that way because there's like three different things flowing at the same time. And that's where people get all mixed up with it. And that's not what it was meant to be. God gave this vision for the church. That's us. And he says, this is what it is. You don't have to understand all of the things that are happening. Just know that the tough things that you're going through, God has a purpose and God has a plan. Here's what John sees at the end of all of this stuff. And he says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared. God's going to create a whole new heaven, a whole new earth. We're going to live on a new earth. In a sense, I just think about that there's a resurrection of our bodies, that this world will be resurrected to a new world. The world was always meant to be. But because sin broke it, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be made whole again. And you know, we walk through this world and we see some incredibly beautiful things in this world, don't we? You look at the creation, there's great things out there. And that's in a broken world. Think of what it's going to be like when it's the perfect world that God always intended it to be. As we wait for that, let's encourage each other that this is what's in front of us, not so that we neglect the living of our life here and now, but encourage each other through the tough times of what we're living through in the here and now, and to encourage each other, keep it up, keep going, keep doing it. It is so worth it. We're not there yet, but we're going to get there. That while we're here, that our lives have purpose and they have meaning because we're bringing glory and honor to God by trying to share what we've just shared, that I've just shared with you. Has that encouraged you? Do you see something better than what you maybe saw before? Or maybe it's just been illustrated a little bit more powerfully to you? Does it fill you with hope and joy? And I'm not just asking rhetorically. Did I hit the mark? Okay. So now, take what you have here, beloved, and share it with a world that is literally dying in darkness. They need to hear what we've just heard. We need to share what has just been shared. Because I didn't cook all this stuff up out of my pointy little head. It's more egg-shaped maybe, but this is from God, from His Word. And so we know it to be true. And all God's people said? Amen. That was a good amen.